Okay, so what models have I used to help people with unwanted same-sex attractions, or perhaps those presenting for help with comorbidities? What I usually do is using an eclectic approach. Generally, I'm using a psychodynamic view under a systemic view. So first is to understand the client very in detail in his history, in his background, his growing up years. And then once the full picture is understood and I help the client to understand his background history or her background history, thereafter then I will be using things like approaches like existential approach as well as a narrative. Once the full understanding and the client now fully understands what has happened and he makes new meaning out of that, then we may use together CBT as well as maybe in some cases EMDR. This is the eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. Usually after that, depending on the client who may or may not give me permission, then I go back to work with the family as well as the community using family systems therapy. So that's usually the cycle in which I will start from psychodynamic under systemic, and then we work together in an understanding of his background history, and then we work on some other therapies if necessary, and then we go back to the systemic and family approaches. What advice would I want to give to somebody who is thinking of going into private practice? So I would like to answer for those who want to move as a practitioner in places where the need is the most, and I'm talking about Asia, Africa, and in many third world countries. Firstly, of course, please get good training and be licensed or registered with a professional group that can help you stay updated. If your own country does not have it, then look around. There may be some countries who will be able to cover, for example, if you are operating worldwide, and some registry boards do provide license and insurance coverage worldwide, or at least in the region. So I think getting yourself qualified and registered is an important step. Thereafter, find a supervisor which is also registered with the same registry board or licensing board, so that that supervisor can now help you in the kind of work that you're doing. Preferably, of course, this area that you're working in is also covered by the registry board. Secondly, I would say, please find a way to be able to offer low-cost sessions, or at least have some kind of sponsorship for subsidized sessions for the clients who are coming to see you. Because the ones who need it most, the ones who need the counseling and the sessions that you can provide, usually are the ones who cannot afford. So it would be very good to find a way where you can lower your costs. So one of the ways in the practice you could do it is to have it in your own home. In that way, you don't have to spend too much on rentals. But you would also need to have some, make sure that you have some limits for your own safety, of course. For example, I would recommend not to accept mandated cases. Mandated cases are people whom, for example, the police or the courts tell them that you must receive counseling. And these clients pretty often may not be willing. Sometimes they can even be hostile. I would say try and find a way in which you get clients who willingly want to have some sessions. These are the best ones, really, because they come, yes, they have struggles, but they are willing to work with you. Fourthly, especially in places where practitioners are very few, engage in more preventive educational work. So let me give you an example or an analogy. If in an area a lot of people are not aware of some very basic preventive work for health, let's say, then you're doing and there's not enough doctors. That's really sad because people will inadvertently get themselves into unhealthy situations and then they don't find enough doctors. So again, for those who want to go into private practice in areas where the need is a lot, I would say think about going into preventive educational work in the society, in the communities. Wonderful if you can also speak the local language. That would be so helpful. How can models be used across cultures, especially if sometimes the narratives is clashing against some of these models? Well, again, I'm going to speak about practitioners who are working in areas where much of the culture tends to be conservative as well as religious. More so in Asian and in African cultures. So what I would say that in almost all religious faiths, there is something that goes something as similar as do not think that what you think is right is better than what God thinks is right. Or rather, do not put aside God's wisdom and put your wisdom ahead. That's pride, that's the lack of wisdom, that's the lack of humility. I think if we can bring this up, and many clients in these regions are also they would defer to their religion. Once that is clear, and once that is what they would really want to do also, then it's quite easy for them to open up themselves and listen to an alternative view that is more aligned to their faith, and it is also aligned to the truth. So all religious faith look for the truth, and if we have good data, good research, you find that much of the truth is also can be quite easily aligned, and that will be helpful to them if we are able to help them open up their views to be open to something that could be more aligned with their religion, aligned with the truth, and something which they feel that, yes, I think this is something I would want to follow. That has been my experience, and I think this is something that I would recommend for practitioners to consider, that they also know the religion of their client, and to help them find this understanding that not to hold on to what they think is right, but to be open to the greater truth that their God or their faith is providing for them. How do social and cultural or geopolitical factors impact my practice? For sure, there are many cultures and languages in Asia. I speak English, and many Singaporeans, most of my clients are from Singapore, Malaysia, and Philippines. But even though it is in English, the culture in these countries are very different. And I would put in more effort just to be able to understand that the culture, where they come from. I would be very truthful and authentic to them by saying, can you please explain your culture a little bit more? What do you mean by this? What do you mean by that? Usually they appreciate my clarification, my questions, and wanting to know. And I do want to know because I do want to understand the situation that they're in. The difference between Protestantism and Catholicism is very small. It's almost negligible. So it doesn't really bother me too much whether they are Christians of this denomination or not, or they're in Catholics. However, if my clients are Muslim, I actually spend more time and interest getting to understand their view from their religious point of view. Frankly, I enjoy it very much because I get to understand their religion, and then I get to understand the situation that they're in context of their religion. So I wouldn't say it impacts, but it adds a very nice variety, and I learned so much from my clients in asking them to explain all these differences. When it comes to geopolitical factors, not too much. There may be a little bit in terms of travel safety. Recently, in Middle East, there was, especially when the US was bombing Iran and the airspace were closed. So there was a little small travel inconvenience over there. Another one that's a bit of a problem that I find, many people in the Western countries like the US, they don't like China. And whenever they see me, they think I'm from China, and sometimes I don't get very good response or body language shown to me. But it doesn't bother me too much because, frankly, I'm not too happy about China myself. But I try to minimize getting myself into those situations because it's very unnecessary for me to receive negative actions from people who do not like China. But so far, I don't have very much, I don't come across many of these problems. In extreme cases, which I have not come across yet, would I help, for example, a major assistant of Hamas, someone who is helping Vladimir Putin, who wants my help? I think I will have to think very, very deeply and carefully about would I want to help such a person because he has a lot of political connections. Most of the time, if that person have a very, very strong need, and if he is able to say, no, I'm not working with these people anymore, then yes, I will still be happy to listen to him and help such a person in some way. How do cultural factors such as views of masculinity or femininity affect or shape people's experiences? For sure, these cultural difference, each culture has a different way of, I wouldn't say mandating, but they have an acceptance of how males should behave. The role of males, the role of females are different. However, I would say that it really depends on the client. Some clients are perfectly fine to go along with these roles, so there's no problem there. But of course, there will be some. It will have some impact on what they can do, what they can't do, and this just for me to keep in mind. However, if the client is not adjusting well, is not accepting, but is resisting what the cultural difference between male and female is, then I want to know why. I want to know how it functions and what are the dynamics that's happening. So it's more of understanding from the client's point of view, what is this difference between male and female in the culture that they are in? How is it impacting them? For example, maybe the father, being in this culture, is supposed to treat the mother in a certain way, which is supposed to be good, but the father is not living up to that role modeling, and that affects this girl who views this, and it affects her way in which she functions as a female or how she functions in relation to male. So it really depends, each culture. So I don't really emphasize too much on what the differences are, but I really look on how much the client, whether she or he is accepting the role or not accepting the role, and what are the reasons. Sometimes the differences may be a little traditional, maybe a little outdated, but that's not a very big problem. It is really for helping the client to understand the generational differences. But if there's a problem of wanting to understand the generational differences, then I usually look for deeper root problem for why this client is not adapting or accepting the cultural differences between male and female. So it really depends on the client.